It's time to welcome in the new year and bid goodbye to this monument in Springfield Park. Mayor Donna Deegan at odds with City Council over the removal, even when the city's attorney gave her the okay.
What we're seeing here, in my view, is politics play out in a situation where they really don't need to be.
I think we've made our point, and I think we will prevent this from happening again, and I think we just need to move forward understanding that.
Jacksonville's Confederate Monument debate, plus Mayor Deegan's new chief of staff, ahead on This Week in Jacksonville. And thank you for joining us. We're saying Happy New Year to Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan, who joins us for our first show of 2024. And absolutely, when we started talking about we wanted to visit on the show, we'll talk about the Confederate Monument stuff in a moment. First, I want to ask about recent gun violence in the city, especially where children have been affected. So some of these things, just over a week ago, a 16-year-old boy died in a shooting in Mandarin. City's first homicide of the year, New Year's Day, took the life of a 14-year-old in Sherwood Forest neighborhood. And then late Wednesday night, a 4-year-old girl and her mother wounded in the Biscayne area of North Side. They're sitting in an SUV. They're in the driveway. Somebody opens fire. Great news, they're expected to survive. But Mayor, we know that this is certainly something that you've said, hey, we've got to get a handle on. The Transition Committee has identified some initiatives for you to address public safety.
Yeah.
Does this just intensify that yearning you and I would have as parents to say we've got to do something to protect our kids?
Well, of course. And you know, this is obviously and unfortunately ongoing discussion that we have here in Jacksonville and in many large cities around the country. But at the end of the day, we have to do what we can to minimize what is obviously the elephant in the room, and that is that most of this is gun violence. You know, one of the things that Sheriff Waters and I just did was we did a lengthy PSA trying to inform people of how to secure their weapons at home so that they're not picked up by somebody out of their car or out of their home, either a child that might unintentionally use it or by somebody who uses it in a crime. And I forget the exact number that he said, but I think he said that one gun can turn over 6 or 7 times once a criminal gets a hold of it and be used in a crime. So I think that's a small piece, but I think it is a piece that we need to deal with. From my front as the mayor of Jacksonville, our initiatives on the Jacksonville journey to reboot that anti-crime and prevention initiative are ongoing. We've just hired Charles Griggs to come in to replace Lakeisha Burton, who had to go, unfortunately, because
Public Health Department.
Yes,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
Charles Griggs has been around and involved in many efforts.
And as you know, Lakeisha's husband was ill, and she had to step down. And Charles is just a wonderful, wonderful, experienced person in this space. He was one of the leaders of the journey when we put it together the last time, and knows a great deal about it. So those initiatives like literacy and making sure that we're connecting with those community partners who can give kids other things to focus on beyond once they get older and get into these things that we don't want them to get into. So from my perspective as mayor, what I can do is prevention intervention programs. Obviously, the gun conversation is a complicated one, and one that's largely been decided in Tallahassee. But I personally would love to see us at some point address the number of guns that are on our streets as well.
Yeah, there's this component of, as the chief executive, if you will, for the municipality and Duval County, and then there's all that law enforcement side. You've got to be able to work with the sheriff.
Yes, we have an elected sheriff as well, who gets to choose what policies he wants to implement and doesn't want to implement. So it is very much a team effort. And from my perspective, I think in my lane, I have a lot of those prevention intervention programs, and that's what we'll be focused on in the mayor's office.
Yeah. So, Mayor, if I asked about the holiday season, at some point we'd come to what happened when you authorized the Women of the Southland Monument to come down in Springfield Park. What can you tell me, I guess, as we start talking about this, about the timing of that? Some people say, oh, in the middle of the night. Wasn't exactly the middle of the night. But it was kind of in that in-between at the very end of the year. Is there anything important to know about the timing of when this monument came down?
Well, yeah, I wanted to do it during a time when there weren't going to be a whole lot of people that were milling around out there, and I was really concerned about safety, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, we saw what happened in Charlottesville some years ago. We've seen how contentious these things can be, and I promised during my campaign for mayor that this was going to be a priority for me to get these things down. I went to council several times, said, do you guys want to vote on this? There was really no interest in doing that. And I understand that from a political perspective for them. That's not my issue. My issue is I'm going to take them down if I can take them down. And I think everyone was very well aware of my intention that way, in terms of, if we're not going to do it this way, I'm going to investigate my options to do it myself. And so I did, and the general counsel said that was within my executive right to do. We had some groups that were willing to raise private money to get it done, and so I didn't have to spend any city dollars to do it. That had been a discussion also.
It had been.
So I'm very grateful that we were able to do it without anybody, any violence, any issues, and frankly, I want people to understand that this monument was placed in the height of the Jim Crow South. This was at a time when these monuments all went up around the same time, basically to promote the lost cause, which was a notion that the Civil War really wasn't about slavery at all, and to venerate whiteness. This wasn't about all women. This was about white women in this memorial, sitting in the middle of a largely black neighborhood. And I think that the injury of that, especially in light of those shootings that we just had, it was just time. And I frankly think everybody, or mostly everybody on that council, knows that it was time. But for one reason or another, mostly for reasons that I think their constituencies perhaps might not be happy with it, they didn't really want to address the issue. And it had been years, Kent, years, that council had been promising to address this issue. So I had the opportunity to do it, and I'm glad it's done.
What's the difference between what Lenny Curry did as mayor in 2020 and removing that monument that was at the time, Hemming Park, right in front of City Hall, and how you handled this? What's the difference?
Well, that's a great question, isn't it? Perhaps that's something that you should ask the city council. I might argue that the difference is that perhaps they had more in common politically with that mayor than they do with me. I don't know. I have said repeatedly that I'm going to remove politics in as much as I can from every decision that I make at City Hall. I'm going to do what I think is the right thing to do within my power. Had the general counsel not given me the go-ahead to do that, I wouldn't have done it. But if it is within my executive power, and it is, I'm going to get it done. I came into this office promising change for good for this city. And that's a good change. And I don't know how many people in business or in the community leadership positions would say that that's not a change for good.
Mayor, I want to make sure that people get to hear kind of the other side of this. City Council met this past week. They said they were trying to get answers to why it could happen without their consent. And City Council President Ron Salem says that he took steps to keep it from happening again by filing some legislation that, if approved by the council, would prevent the mayor from using private funds for city projects.
This legislation is just to clarify the power of the mayor in terms of taking donations in kind or cash and doing things. I think that what she did was beyond her power personally, but this legislation will clarify it going forward so that this does not happen again.
What do you think about the comments by Council President there?
Well, we have a general counsel who has 22 years of experience in law. I don't believe that our council president has that experience, and he is the one that looked up all the case law and determined that this was the proper thing to do. So I was disappointed that President Salem basically, during that council meeting, decided that he would question the integrity of our new general counsel. When something doesn't go your way, it doesn't go your way. And I think that's what an honest broker is. The general counsel has made decisions that I'm not particularly happy about too, but you move forward with that. He did what he felt was the right thing to do, and that's as you know, the law in Jacksonville when the general counsel speaks.
The general counsel.
Yes. Yeah. So in terms of this legislation is concerned, I think it is a knee-jerk overstep by this council, a knee-jerk reaction to something that is going to happen one time. You know, this is something that I said that was important to get done. It was the last standing Confederate monument in our city, and we needed to get it down. This is not something I'm sure you heard some of the discourse. You know, President Salem says it's not political. It seemed very political to me, but I don't think it's needed legislation. And just like he is concerned about the powers of the city council, I too am concerned about the executive powers of the mayor. So I don't agree with the legislation. I suspect council will do what council does.
The structure of government and the consolidated city of Jacksonville has a strong mayor form of government.
That's exactly right.
There's certainly discussion about that. When we come back, thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor's going to stay with us. And when we come back, we're going to get into the sports scene, specifically how that affects the local economy, from the Jaguars in the Stadium of the Future, Florida, Georgia, the Gator Bowl, the players, and other events. Talking about sports tourism. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And welcome back. There were some developments late this week involving a long-running downtown development project, the Laura Street Trio. 3 buildings on Laura and Forsyth Streets. They were built after the Great Fire, but they've sat vacant for decades. A developer wants to turn them into a hotel, restaurant, apartments, retail space. The latest funding plan involved the city spending $22 million to secure a construction loan for the developer. But then Thursday afternoon, the city council sent that proposal back to Downtown Investment Authority. Here's what the developer, Steve Adkins, told our Jim Piggott after that decision.
Do you think this project could be dead as a result of this at all?
It's a possibility. It's a possibility. And unfortunately, the next step would probably be to take the buildings down and to build something else. That would be really unfortunate. That's certainly not what we would like to do. I think it's too important to the city, but we may be left with no other alternative.
But could you do that since they're historical?
Yeah, you could take things down. I mean, everything's got a lifespan.
Mayor Donna Deegan is still with us. So, Mayor, the developer's got a point. Adkins says he's trying to get something done for 10 years now. What do you think is going to happen there? What do you want to see happen for the Laura Street Trio?
Well, all of us, I think universally, myself, the council, probably everybody who has paid attention to downtown Jacksonville and its famous potential, has said we absolutely need and want to save the Laura Street Trio. The question is, what deal can we get to make that happen that will not put the city at great liability? And if you watched that proceeding today, what you saw was everybody from the city auditors to Lori Boyer from DIA to Anna Brochet, our CFO, to Mike Weinstein come out and say, listen, this deal puts the city at a maximum risk of more than a couple $100 million over the lifespan of the deal. And that is a big risk for this city to take at a time when we've got a lot of other things coming down the pike. We've got a new jail that we're looking at. We've got this whole stadium thing we're looking at. We've got all sorts of things that we're looking at having to spend big dollars on, and it just has to be a prudent deal for the city. It's not the city's fault that all these other deals didn't go through. They just didn't happen for a variety of reasons. So absolutely, our commitment is to get the Laura Street Trio done. It has to be the right fit for the city. We can't put the city at some great liability. And hopefully, as they continue to work on that, I think they're still working on it. We have absolutely no intention of allowing those buildings to be destroyed.
I think a little of what I heard from the developer there, Steve Adkins, is maybe some frustration.
But well, yeah, and maybe a little attempt to make it look like the house is on fire. But I think, look, I like Steve, and I really want to get this done. At the end of the day, I think they'll go back, they'll work on the deal some more, and they'll come back to DIA, and hopefully within some weeks we'll have something that we can actually do. But it has to be something that's good for the city.
We'll shift into another topic that to a degree involves downtown. Jacksonville is a sports town, crazy about football for sure, but all the sporting events make a difference financially. How much do you think Jacksonville businesses really depend on sports tourism and the events, whether it's football games, the Jags, Gator Bowl, Florida, Georgia, the players, all these different sporting events? How big a deal is that for people in Jacksonville?
Well, listen, we are a sports crazy town, that's for sure. And I think, when you look at the potential of this renovated stadium, Alex Alston, who's come into sports and entertainment, has done such an amazing job just tracking down possibilities for things that we can bring into the city. We're once again bidding on the NCAA basketball championship games. So it's incredibly important. And I think that what you're going to see us do in the city over the next several years, and I know that President Salem is very much on this page, is we want to make sure that we are very focused on doing what we can to bring in as much sports tourism as we can to the city of Jacksonville. I mean, we've always said it, we've got the perfect venue. And we are creating and will be creating even better venues for everything from sports to concerts to, you name it. So absolutely, that is something that we are going to focus heavily on.
Part of the reason I asked that question is what's happening with the Jaguars. So the team has said, hey, our stadium doesn't meet NFL standards. We want to revise this. Obviously, that's a big issue. Do you feel like the Jaguars are saying, hey, this is our demand, or is it a request? Let's work together to renovate the stadium.
Well, it's both, really. I mean, the NFL has a great deal to say about the types of stadiums they're going to allow their teams to play in. So there is truth to that. But the Jaguars, so far, our discussions with the Jaguars have gone very well. I think we're right on pace where we want to be in our discussions. I'm very pleased with where those conversations are right now. We're hopeful to have some framework of an agreement that we can come out with sometime in the spring. And then I know that that for President Salem, he'd like to get it done during his presidency. I'd sure like to get it done quickly, because I think the longer we've seen a history in Jacksonville of when we kick the can down the road on things, very often they don't get done, or they become, or the terms change and they become more expensive because you've waited too long to get them done. So my hope is we can come up with a framework of an agreement and get that done by summer.
All right, so we're going to dig even deeper into the topic of sports tourism in my weekly podcast, This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. It came out this past Thursday. Michael Corrigan of Visit Jacksonville, and then Airstream Ventures owner Alan Verlander join me, and you can find new episodes every Thursday at 9 a.m. You're going to find it right now on News4Jax Plus under the channel This Week in Jacksonville. All right, so Mayor Deegan is staying with us, and we're going to talk about a change to her key leadership staff, why she chose a healthcare executive as her new chief of staff. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Voters elected Donna Deegan mayor in Jacksonville last year, and she's now with us in the second half now, your first term at City Hall, your first year here. So, Mayor, it seems like the most important position in administration would be that chief of staff role. Tell us about the change that you made, so 6 months in, new chief of staff, and then tell us about the hire of Darnell Smith.
Yeah, well, Pat McCullough, incredible campaign manager, did a fantastic job getting us in, getting us organized, getting us across the line on that $25 million that we put through council for all of those transition initiatives. At the end of the day, you know, it's not uncommon after an organizational period for people to shuffle around a bit. And we felt like it was important with a finite amount of time to make sure that we had somebody in that role that was going to be able to really drive the agenda with council, with staff. Darnell has just had a reputation in this community as, well, I mean, there's nobody with a bigger heart. Yeah. There's nobody but not only that, he has just tremendous skills when it comes to, I think, negotiating things and creating a type of environment where the number one initiatives of this administration can get through. There's a lot of nuance to be done between a mayor of one party and a council of largely another party. Yeah. And you know, I don't like to talk about party politics. I don't like for it to enter into anything, to be honest. But unfortunately, I'm not dealing with the same thing everywhere. And so I think it's really important to have somebody who has been that director, who has made things happen. And who can get the most out of those staff members and out of that relationship with City Council. And I think Darnell can do that. You've seen it over the years. He's a community champion. He's somebody that, as I said, he has such a huge heart, and also the relationships, I think, to help move the agenda.
So Darnell Smith, one of the friendliest people I've ever met. He's got a way of offering you acceptance and validation 100%. In almost every conversation. Yeah. Also a high-level executive for one of the nation's top health insurance providers. What is the fit there? And maybe explain this. He's going to be an executive on loan. It's not a direct hire of the city. How does that work?
Well, that's about the dozenth time we've done that at City Hall. So that's not an uncommon thing to do, to bring in an executive on loan to fill a position. So that's happened, and it's happened from Florida Blue before. So we just thought with his skill set that he was the perfect person to come in and lead that team. So the executive on loan is simply you create a contract where he is separated from the company during his time with us, but the company will pay his salary, and the city does not pay any money for him. So he's on loan from that company, but technically no longer a part of that company while he's there, while he's at City Hall.
Yeah. How do you make sure that that there's no influence for a company that's putting that position on loan? Obviously, critics would say, hey, wait a second, or is Florida Blue in this case going to get unfair treatment?
Well, like I said, this has been a pretty common practice at City Hall over the years, so it's not something new. What I would say is we have a couple of contracts with Florida Blue that have already been signed and for long terms, so we don't have anything even on the radar with them for more than 5 years. Everything's been negotiated and done.
And Darnell Smith has that reputation that is way up here. So
Darnell won't ever do anything to put us in any jeopardy. I can promise you that.
I'm looking forward to seeing him again. I looked forward to getting to visit with you today, Mayor Donna Deegan. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, exactly. So This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. City Councilman Jimmy Peluso is on the calendar for next week. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17, and then you'll find us online at news4jax.com and streaming on News4Jax Plus.
See why every day more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.